Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today we got a micro build on the channel, and it is the iFlight iX2 stretch. So this is going to be pretty interesting. This was provided to me by iFlight, so this is going to be pretty fun. This is one of the first free frames I've gotten, or DIY kits. So this does come as a DIY kit from their website, and they give you everything. They give you your motors, one set of props, 3D printed camera holder, and they give you a tiny all-in-one camera, which is a 25 milliwatt 48 channel camera, which is pretty cool, pretty sweet. It's very tiny. The frame is pretty awesome. Actually, the bottom plate is 3 millimeters, and it is a stretch, and the top plate is 2 millimeters. I've already measured those. However, this is so awesome right here. So this is rocking an F4. This is the flight controller, and it's rocking an F4 processor. So that's just gonna be pretty sick. And this is, I believe it's a BB2 chip ESCs, 4-in-1 ESCs, which can run D-Shot 600. And what's so cool is basically you don't have to wire it, you just plug it in. So this is just absolutely awesome. It's gonna keep a nice clean build for us, and it's just everything here is just there really. They give you your JST, they give you your motors, they give you a buzzer, and everything else you need to put it together. Battery strap, as well as propeller guards. So let's get started. Alright, so first thing we want to do actually is we want to remove these screws so we can actually set them up on the frame here. So I'm just going to quickly skip over this and we will be right back. So taking this apart right now, I just noticed that they even have rubber dampeners on the ESC, which is actually pretty sweet, pretty awesome actually. So this is going to be pretty cool. So we're going to remove these screws here, and we're going to stick them through. Alright, so when this comes in the box, a flight controller, it comes in this box right here, and it's already put together. What I do recommend is you remove it, and then once you take out the frame, it does have some standoffs, and you need to use a bit bigger standoffs here. So you put the screw, I don't know the measurement, but I think they're like 8 millimeters, and then these are the 5 millimeters. So these would go down here and it would hold just fine. And then these 4-in-1 ESC, which is pretty awesome here, it does have rubber damping on the ESC, so that's pretty cool. And we're rocking a F4 flight controller on this guy. However, I don't know if we do have OSD or not. I have not checked actually, and the website is down, so yeah. Anyways, we'll just take it as we go. So right now we have these set up in place, and what I'm going to do actually is we're going to start setting up solder on the ESC first, which I believe is the best thing to do. And I think we're also going to take power. We're going to put the JST connector straight to the power, the ESC. So we're going to stick the JST on the ESC instead of the flight controller. I think that's the best way to do it, just in case this has an OSD, we don't want to get a lot of noise. And we want the motors to get just a direct power, because if we powered this guy up here, the power, I don't think this is even possible. The power would have to come from these little guys for all the motors. So the smart thing to do actually is we're going to grab this JST and we're going to stick it to this guy, and then the ESC should send power to the flight controller. So let's solder up the pads here and stick the JST connector on, and then we take it from there. Alright guys, so we're going to begin with heating up the pads and putting solder on them. So I'm just heating up my solder station here. I've set it to 350 degrees Celsius. And I've also removed this standoff here, just so we could, when we put solder here, we don't risk, burning it, and that usually does happen. So let's just take it the best way, which is this way. So this is the front, and if you do have this, make sure you have the battery terminals on the back left. So we're going to start with the ESC part here, the motors. Alright, so that side's done. I think this is going to be a pretty fast build, since they've already have these pins and set up for the connection to the flight controller, which makes your life a lot easier. So here, see this, be careful with this, so try to come in like this from here, and feed it the solder from this side so you don't burn these female pin headers, which I almost just did right now. So they're pretty nice sized for soldering. They're not gonna be, they shouldn't be that difficult. Just make sure you keep the solder tip clean, because that'll just create a nightmare for you if it jumps somewhere, and especially if you don't have any some of that solder remover. All right, so now we're gonna put solder on the power for the JST, and we should put a little bit more actually. Hold on, I should clean the tip because it's starting to come off. All right, that's good there. Let's do this one now. Perfect. So this type of quad, the battery is supposed to be mounted up top, as you can see right here. So what we want to do is actually, we don't want to keep, you never want to keep your battery wires very long here, just because it can introduce noise into the system and it could just be very bad. I've tested it, and I still haven't made the video about it, but it does create. So we need it just long enough to just like pop up, but not too long to actually ruin everything for us. So we risk hitting it with the propellers, and that is just very annoying. So what we want to do is we want to make sure it's going to come up here, and I think, what is it, half or a little bit more than half we should cut off, like right to here. Right here should be perfect actually, right there. So that's pretty good. Just into consideration, there you go. So about that big, so that's gonna be fine right here. So right now what we want to do is set these guys up. And these are silicone, so that's awesome. So they're not going cheap on us. So that's just awesome. I really like that. iFlight has been doing actually very good lately on through my testing. Alright, so we're going to set these down and put solder on the wires. I always recommend twisting them, because if while you're soldering them on, they get, sometimes they could just spread out and touch things you don't want them to touch, and it's just very terrible. You can short everything out just because of that little mistake. Alright, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to grab the hemostats. These are a must-have. These dictate your quad's cleanliness, if you want to use that word. So this can provide you with a very nice solder joint on very thick wires, because you can hold it without worrying about keeping tension or even keeping tension or burning your fingers. So that's perfect. So there we go. We got our positive in. And let's get our negative in. So maybe this is good. So we want to actually try to solder it straight, because if we have it like this, and then once the solder actually grabs a hold of that, then this wire will always be sticking out towards the propeller, and that's a big no-no. So we want to actually solder it in like this. So that is how I'm going to do it, and I think that is the best way to do it. Especially with these micros, the wires just love catching the propellers. So actually I'm going to get the hemostats again here. So right about there should be perfect. We should have cleaned off the tip, but it's totally fine. And we're good. So especially when you solder, this part, the solder would get soaked in, and it'll make that part very hard to bend. So if it was out like this, and then it'll always be like that. So yeah, you want to try to avoid that as much as possible. So now you can see this, it's just going straight back, And if we had cut this, if I'd noticed this earlier, I would have cut the positive a little bit shorter so we don't have this little ugly bend in the wire. But that's totally fine, you know. You could just like twist it and then stick it there to the battery, and then it should be fine. So, all right, so that's good. Next step, let's put in the motors and let's just start soldering them in. So I'm gonna skip me putting on the motors with their screws just because I mean, it's just, you just put your motors on and then we'll come back and then we'll do the soldering and I'll show you which motor goes where. So yeah, it's like little candy. Look at it, it's pretty awesome. So something to take note of, they give you 6 screws and these are not backup screws. So you get 4 smaller ones and 2 larger ones. These 2 larger ones are the ones that are going to be connecting to the top once you put the propeller on. So be careful not to put these on the bottom. So take the top ones and just move them off to the side, or even better, screw them in, but don't screw them in too deep because usually the propeller would be here. So just enough just to hold and it won't come loose. This way you don't lose them, because if you lose them, you're basically not going to be able to fly because these propellers need these screws to be held in place. So we're just going to screw these guys in so we don't lose them on every motor. And yeah, just take note of this. And don't screw these in too much because you could even damage the coils inside. So just a tiny bit will be just enough. So yeah, there we go. That should be just fine. All right, so let me screw them in and then we'll be right back. Alright guys, so actually these screws are very tiny, and you get a bag of screws also with your prop guards, and they come with 2 types of screws in the prop guard. So we're not going to be able to use these screws that came in with the motor. However, we're going to use the ones for the propeller that we put up top here. So if you take a look at these little tiny screws and we actually start putting them in, here, let me show you, it'll focus right now, and that will not hold anything. That's just like 2 threads right there. So there's these screws that came with the prop guards, and they actually have 2 sets. They have a larger ones and a smaller ones. So these larger ones we want to avoid unless you're going to install your prop guards. So we're not going to be using the larger ones. We're going to use a little bit smaller ones here. And let's just take a look how this will look once we put it through. And that's much better. Let it focus. Okay, and that is much better, and we should be totally fine. So if we just hold it actually next to each other, and these do have a gap so we can tell if these screws were to hit the coils, and if they are, then well, I mean they shouldn't, but if they are, then try to avoid that. So as you can see, it's just perfect right there. So yeah, let me just get it to focus just right. There we go. So as you can see right there, that's perfect size. It's not going to go up there and touch those coils. So we're going to be using these little white screws, and these come with the normal, you know, Phillips screw head, tiny one. And yeah, so let me put those into place and I'll be right back. Alright guys, so now they're all in. I didn't open the other packs, so this is why these are still here. I'm going to keep them here so I don't lose them. Now what we want to do is actually bring the standoff we removed, and we're going to plug it back in. So, or screw it back in. It might be a little bit difficult because of the way we soldered this on, or if you soldered it on, but for me it's going in just fine. It's a little bit of pressure, but it's just going in, it's good. So that's very nice. Alright, so now what we want to do is start soldering the motors to the ESC. And it's a bit confusing at first, so let's check this out. Okay, so make note of the orientation if you're building along with me here. And this is motor 1. On the back right is motor 1. Motor 1 is going to go right here. So we're going to start soldering these right here. So, and it doesn't matter the wire orientation because later on you could flip it in Betaflight. So we're just going to solder them straight as possible. So actually maybe, depending on how high the prop's going to be, let's just double check because we might solder these to the bottom. Oh, this is very far here. What about this one? So it's always good to double check everything. Let's put this guy on, and if he's here, to make sure we get a nice straight good. Okay, that should be fine. That's not going to touch. So as you can see here, but I still recommend we solder them to the bottom. That'll make everything a little bit more complicated. So we're just going to, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to leave some slack, some extra wire. And what we're going to do first, actually, is I'm going to grab a small zip tie, and I'm going to zip tie them right here, like this. And then that way, we can leave a little slack and put them in, and then they will never touch the propeller guard, and we never have to worry about anything ripping off, because these motors are very sensitive. So, I mean, the motor wires are very tiny, and they have a tendency, they just love to rip easily. So let me get the zip ties. We're going to zip tie them in place, and then we're going to start soldering. Alright guys, so as you can see, I just put zip ties on the farthest part here, and then we're going to use tweezers to figure out the length, cut them, and then solder them on. So let's do that now. So first thing I want to do is, right now this is the back side, so just take note of the orientation. We have this motor. I'm going to take the furthest one in right here, make sure I grab it, and it's this one right here, and make sure it's pretty well, you know, there's enough, it's not loose here, so it's a tightened through. And then we're going to just take it and then just bend it down a little bit, and then see, like right about there. I don't know if you guys can see that clearly, but just like that, that's going to be perfect. So what we're going to do is actually we're going to cut it right here, right there. So let's get that up now. And for these wires, do not use strippers because you could actually ruin it. So I recommend you hold it and then you pinch and pull, and usually that will do the trick. Yep, there we go. So we got the wire, and I recommend you make sure you twist it because you don't want one of these wires sticking out and touching anything that it's not supposed to. So here's our first wire, and now we're gonna just put a little solder on it and then trim it if we have to. Make sure the solder tip is clean. Okay. And there we go. Now we got this, our first guy right here, and it's gonna be pretty good. Maybe he's a little bit too long, but I think it'll be fine. Actually, let's make him a little bit shorter here. So we don't want him this long. So we're gonna cut him up again. All right. And the pinching method is the best way with these tiny silicone wires that I've managed to come up with. So, and I do recommend you do that because I've ruined motors, tiny motors like this before, trying to either burn it with a lighter or trying to use a wire stripper. So as you can tell now, the wire is a bit too long, so we're gonna have to trim some of that off right now. So let's just grab something here. We don't want it that long, so that's perfect. So it's pretty tiny, and we don't need much. Hold him in place, and it's a bit tiny, it's a bit tricky, but should be pretty straightforward. There we go, we got our first wire. Now we're gonna do the same process for the other one here. So it's held in good. We're gonna get the second wire, which is right here, and I'm gonna cut him right about here. Same process, fingernails, twist the wire. It's very important to twist the wire. So, and then add a little solder onto him. Okay, and we're gonna make him, we're gonna chop some of that off here. A little bit more. It's too much, but it's okay. Okay, there we go. And that's going to be perfect right there. So there we go. However, you see how dirty this solder joint is? That's because I did not clean it very well, the solder tip, and that is not a good thing to have. There we go, it's better. So I'm going to skip over the rest and then I'll show you where each motor goes. So actually let's zoom out a little bit here. So this motor, the back right motor, would go here. This motor would go here. This motor would go here. And this motor would go here. So let me skip over this and I'll be right back, guys. Alright guys, so now all the motors are soldered onto the ESC, which is awesome. Now we're going to bring the flight controller. So let's quickly take a look at these pins because I just found the manual to this guy so we can actually know what is what here. Now let me just prepare the camera and then we get started. Alright guys, so right now what we have, so if you're going to connect S-Bus, okay? S-Bus would be on UART1, which would be this receive pin right here. So this is UART1 receive, this is UART1 TX transmit, and this is TX3, and then this is RX3. So this is UART3, and then here we have these two are 5 volt, and we have these two are ground. And here we have the buzzer positive, buzzer minus. We're going to connect the buzzer here also. This is where we're going to connect the buzzer. And here is the LED, and here's the ground for LED. I believe this is the LED signal pin, so it's not the 5 volt for the LED. You would get your LED from somewhere else. This would be your signal, and this is your ground. So what we're going to do is we're going to need these two 5 volts. So this 5 volt will go to the camera, and this 5 volt will go to our receiver, and here are their grounds. So I'm going to be connecting iBus, so I'm going to connect it on UART3, which will be right here. If you're using FrSky S-Bus, you would put it right here, your signal, and you would power it up just the same way I'm going to. And the buzzer, like I told you, ground here, positive here, and after that we should be actually good to go. So right now what we're going to do is prepare the pads, and then we take it from there. Alright, so first we are going to prepare the buzzer pads, because since they're up top, and they should be pretty simple. So the buzzer pads are going to be these top two guys, and actually this is very unstable, so I'd recommend we put it on this guy. So let's do that now. Okay. Alright, so this is the correct orientation. After searching around, we've done it right. Now I had it right. So let me zoom in for you guys here. Alright, right there. So we're going to start with the buzzer ports. So this is going to be the ground. This is the ground. And you should not use the same tip I'm using at all, because these are very, very tiny. So there's our buzzer, and now we're gonna do our 5 volt and ground. Okay, just gonna add a little solder on most of them, just make our life a little bit easier. Okay, so we got those, and we are going to be connecting to our X3 for our receiver, which will be right here. Okay, and what else do we have? Ground LED, we're not going to be doing that. So our receiver would take from here, camera is going to take from the top row, and this one's going to be for the buzzer. And that should be it. So let's grab the camera and connect it. Alright guys, so our camera comes with 4 wires, and it kind of can be confusing for some people. So all we really need to focus on is the black and the red wire, which is positive and negative. And this is for video out and video in. Now I'm not sure if we're supposed to bridge these two together. This is if you had OSD, you would stick these out. So I'm not sure yet if we're supposed to bridge these together or not, but I will figure that out in a little bit. I'll connect it to the power bench and we'll figure it out. So first we're going to actually solder in the receiver, and then we're going to solder in the power for the camera after we figure it out, and then we're going to solder the buzzer. So let's get that started with. Alright guys, so for receiver I'm going to be using the FlySky or FSA8S, and I'm going to connect it through iBus, and then here's its VCC and ground. So here's its cable, and white is going to be our signal, which connects to RX3, and the red will connect to 5 volt, and the black will connect to ground. So I really like these because they're small, and they will give us some extra space in here. I think we're gonna probably use double side tape to hold them in place here. I'm not sure yet if that'll be good, or I doubt we're gonna have room to do that really here. So this is gonna be a bit tricky. So yeah, we'll figure it out. So let's just keep extra wire so we can actually move him. So I'm gonna cut the wire all the way to here, and that should be on the safe spot for us. And if you're using the same kind of receiver here, and these wires are very terrible, so it's really difficult to actually get them stripped. So what I use is actually I just get a lighter here, and then just do this and quickly remove some of that. There we go. Or sometimes you could expose a bit too much, and we could fix that up. So let me just twist the wires now so we can prepare them. Okay. And alright, so wires are all twisted. We're going to add solder. That should burn off the bad insulation that we've kind of burnt off through way. So we can cut the wire accordingly. As you can see, it just basically melted that part because we had burned most of it with the lighter. And we have this guy here. Okay, good. So now we're going to trim these off to allow it not to expose so much. That's going to be good there. That's going to be good. Perfect. So we made them very tiny here. So what we're going to do is actually we're going to start from this side and then move to this side, because then we could come in, because I'm right-handed, so I could come in like this, come in like this, come like this without worrying about hitting the wire next to each other. So yeah, that should be good. So we're going to start out with the white wire here. And this is, you have to make sure, triple check that your solder tip is clean, because it is very scary. So there we go. We got our white wire in, as you can see there. Now we're going to move to, next one is 5 volts, so it would be the red wire. It would be this guy. Okay, and then ground. So they're nicely soldered in. We're just going to double check everything here. And everything seems fine, but this guy has pushed in a bit too much here, but it's totally fine. So that's good right there. Now let's jump to the camera. So where is the camera? Here it is. So like I said before, I'm not sure if we have to bridge these two or not. Well, we'll figure it out. So first, let's actually just connect the power to this guy. So we're gonna need ground and the red and the black wire. So let's do those now. And we're gonna keep the buzzer. I don't think I'm gonna install the buzzer now. So let's start with, actually what I'm going to do is I'm gonna desolder the red wire from the receiver here because it's in the way. And it's okay if both red wires touch because they're taking from the same place, so that's totally fine. We could even solder it on top of this guy and we won't have a problem. So that's also good if you had to do that. Okay. So I've desoldered this guy. We're gonna push him like this. And then we're going to solder him in backwards so we can get it away from there, so we have room to solder in our camera. So that's good right there. Let's zoom in. So I soldered him in backwards so we don't get anything touching. Now let's grab the camera. It's going to be a little bit tricky. So here's the camera wire. And that went through just perfect. So did that. So now we have our camera soldered into place, which is awesome. Alright, so once the camera is ready, they do give you an extra M3 nut here, so you could just stick it through. You don't even need a nut. It'll just thread through the 3D printed part, and that's really it. And I just put the nuts on now, and what I'm going to do with the receiver is I've just checked and I do have room, so I'm going to use double-sided tape just to hold it right there. So let's do that now, and then we put it together, and then on the next episode will be the maiden, so that'll be pretty awesome. So this looks very promising. I'm very excited for this. It's a very thick frame, you know. Micros usually don't come this thick. They're usually between like 1 and 2 millimeters. So this is kind of crazy. It's kind of cool. So double-sided tape is always important in this hobby. Very important, because this double-sided tape will last a very long time once it holds up very well. There we go. Come on. All right. And then we want it just below the iFlight as I checked. Okay, and then that's there. Let this guy through here. And perfect. That's really it. So we could do whatever we want with this guy. Add a zip tie and just have him up here. See? And we are good. So let's put the nuts on. Nuts, I mean screws. So you will need to flash this to the latest, because out of the box, the firmware that I got at least does not have D-Shot, so I just flashed it. And you flash it with the Airbot F4 firmware. So they're using that firmware for this flight controller. And I've already gone ahead and set up iBus and everything. If you guys are interested, we could also do that part. So here's a little bad boy. So it's pretty fat stack right there. So that's pretty nice. So let's turn it on. Hopefully there's no smoke, and we can arm it, see if it arms. If everything works out great, everything should be just totally fine. Here's the battery. This is a 3S battery. Okay, that's good. It's very nice. I like the color scheme inside. Let's turn on the transmitter, and we Perfect. Let's put the propellers on. Turn off my transmitter. And that's really going to conclude it. So we're just going to put the propellers on and just take a last look at it. And then next episode, we'll do the flight. And if you guys are interested in the software side, we can also do that. So that's it, guys. So I'll be right back after I put these propellers on, and then we can take one last look at it. Alright guys, so here is the end result. So we put the props on. I've changed the nuts to red ones because I just found them. I forgot they come with red ones with the frame, so I put the red ones on. I left the bottom ones black. So yeah. Overall, it's a clean build. I just hovered it in the house and I just straight smacked into the ceiling because I was not expecting the power it had. I have a couple micros, but nothing compared to this one. It just 40% throttle hovering, 50%, 60% throttle. I'll just give it a little push and I just ended up hitting the ceiling. It's that quick. So this one's going to be fun indoors and outdoors. Indoors is going to be a bit challenging to control this guy. It's just ridiculously fast. I don't know if it's the motors or these propellers, but yeah, that was very good. So this one seems like a good one so far. So we're gonna have to wait till the made in flight outside. So that's gonna be interesting. Maybe I'll take it out tomorrow, I think, and take this guy out for a flight. So overall, it was a very easy, clean build. Just some things you need to note of, just like the orientation of the flight controller and the ESC. But other than that, once you figure that out, now hopefully I helped you out in that perspective, you should be good. And another thing to note, what you have to do, zip tie your power lines because they actually do come very, very, very close. And yeah, so you have to just try to have the zip tie as low as possible, because the higher it is, the more of a risk you have of chopping them off. And you don't want to be chopping these off in front of some big bushes, because then even your buzzer won't work. So you could say bye-bye to this guy. So that's not a very pleasant thing to lose, to be honest, because this has a lot of potential. And that's really it, guys. So if you guys have any questions or any suggestions, just feel free to ask. And if you guys have any problems or anything just with this build, if you guys are going to try this build, just let me know and I'll help you out. And that's going to conclude it for this video, guys. So I really hope you guys liked it and enjoyed it. And I will see you next time for the maiden. See you guys. Take care.